Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for March 9th, 2021. Let's just give a minute for people to pop on, as always. I'm Avram Pilch, Editor-in-Chief of Tom's Hardware, and I am joined by Associate Editor Les Pounder, Raspberry Pi expert Ash Puckett, and today our very special guest is Ben Nuttall from Pi Wheels. Hi, Ben. How are you doing?
Hello. Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times, like probably most people who are watching, I've downloaded a repository that was coming from Pi Wheels. So downloaded some code. So can you tell us how that got started and how Pi Wheels got started and like how many things you service there today?
Yeah, so it kind of came around from I was working with a guy called Dave Honus, who used to work with a Raspberry Pi on the Astro Pi project. We wanted to see if we could upload some new packages to the Pis running on the International Space Station, and he was asking me like how do you go about kind of doing offline installs of this kind of thing, and I said, well, there's a standard called the wheel, which is a binary package. You can provide that file, and you can kind of just bundle that onto the SD card, and you can install from it. And we went through the process of building the wheels, and it took a long time because we were building them on and for the Raspberry Pi 1, for the original Pi 1 hardware. And I kind of had the idea that, well, if we did this for all of the packages, maybe we could host them, provide them, so other people don't have to do this bit. And it basically just came from there. The wheel is an existing standard. It's how you distribute pre-compiled packages for Python easily and quickly and make them easy for people to install. And there's a standard for how you host a repository that pip knows how to talk to. And so I kind of got everything going, set it up, did a kind of proof of concept, does this work? And it seemed to work. So, and then Dave Jones, who's one of the kind of contributor that I work with quite a lot, who's a community member and friend of mine, he joined me. We used to work on GPI 0 together as well. And yeah, the two of us have kind of looked after it from there. And it's, we've built on top of that kind of base foundation of what I built, and added to the project from then. It's let me just take a look at the stats. We've had 3.6 million downloads in the last 30 days, and 36 million, nearly 37 million overall now. So it's doing pretty well. Saved a lot of people a lot of time.
Fantastic. It's community projects like that that have really made the Pi the gold standard. So that's amazing. How long so that's been around how many years now?
It's something like three years, something like that.
Wow. And broadcasting code to space.
Yeah, that was the noble first goal of the project was that, but went on to help people around the world. Yeah.
So what are some of the other things that you do in the Pi community?
So, I mean, very early on, I was kind of involved as Les was in the Raspberry Jam community. Les kind of inspired me to start an event in Manchester that was based on some of the events that the kind of Linux and Ubuntu events that he'd run before, and we kind of got started doing stuff like that, and then I actually ran a Raspberry Pi newsletter, a weekly email newsletter called Pi Weekly. And I was kind of doing lots of things like that, working with teachers in the STEM network and that kind of thing that was going on in Manchester at the time. And I ended up getting hired by the foundation, and I worked there for 6 years, and I kind of did all sorts of different things. But and now I kind of, I mean, I've got the GPI 0 project and Pi Wheels and things like that I kind of maintain and just keep ticking along. Occasionally have bursts of effort on taking those forward.
Wow, neat. So Les tells me that you have a new a new Raspberry Pi project that you're working on.
Yeah, so it kind of came out of the PiWheels project. So the way that we actually manage the PiWheels system is it's everything is all the packages are compiled natively on Raspberry Pi hardware. So we need essentially a set of instances of actual physical Pis that we can spin up at any time we need to, and get them to build the packages. And maybe when the queues die down, we can kind of tear them down the same way you would with kind of VM instances, that kind of thing. And the way that we're able to do that is a hosting company based in Cambridge. They're the hosts of the Raspberry Pi website, and I kind of got to know them through when I was working on the Raspberry Pi website years ago. And they actually built this rack of Raspberry Pi servers that you can, like I said, you can spin them up one at a time, and just you request one, you get its IP address, you SSH into it, it's yours for as long as you want it. And they do kind of monthly billing or like per second billing, I think. And they were happy to let me kind of to use that and kind of bash the platform around and see what I could do with it. And that whole rack of Pis is the base of how PiWheels both is run and is hosted. So that every single time you run a pip install, it hits one of those Pis in that. In fact, the same Pi. There's one Pi that's hosting everything. Hits that Pi. The Pi serves you the file, and you're downloading it from one actual single Raspberry Pi. And so the project is some system, some code for managing, booting up those instances, and actually provisioning and canceling and managing SSH keys and all the things that you can do with this Pi cluster that's available through this company, Mythic Beasts. So it's called Hosted Pi. It's available through pip, obviously, and you just create API credentials for your account, and you can spin up Pis and decommission them. And it's making the PiWheel system a bit easier to manage, and it's been kind of a fun little project to work on in lockdown.
So can other people get access to this, and do we know how much it costs?
Yeah, so the Pi the service provided by Mythic Beasts has been available for probably about 3 years now, and there are other people using it, people paying to use it, and the Hosted Pi library that I'm creating. So it's both a kind of a Python library, so you can import it and write custom Python programs that manage, talk to other services and spin up Pis when they need to. But it's also a command line interface written in the Python, in the API that I created. So you can run commands like hosted Pi create, and it will, spin you on up and return the details, that kind of thing. That is the library itself is kind of most of the way there. It's mostly finished and it's usable. I wouldn't consider it kind of stable yet, but it's you can install it and it's available. So pip install hosted Pi, and the docs are on hostedpi.readthedocs.io.
Neat. So is it free at this point?
Yeah. So Mythic Beast, they have billing for the actual usage, and they manage all of that. The library that I've created is just a wrapper around the API they provide. So it's obviously just a free service in that port. Yeah.
Oh wow. So what are some of the, besides working with Wheels, what are some of the things that people would do with it?
I mean, it could just be a sort of cheap hosting solution, because running a website on a Raspberry Pi is quite a cost-effective way of doing it. And if you're familiar with managing Raspberry Pis and using SSH and SSHing into your Pis around your house and that kind of thing, then it's very familiar. So yeah, you could just host, a kind of static site or lamp stack website, something like that. Or, I mean, for me, it's you getting access to actual Pi hardware. So that I need to compile stuff that is compiled on and for the Raspberry Pi specific ARM architecture. So any application that actually requires a physical Pi, it's ideal for. So actually, the folks in the TensorFlow team at Google, I know they were actually using these at one point to compile the TensorFlow wheels or actually probably just test the TensorFlow wheels on Raspberry Pi hardware without needing to kind of provision it, actually physically on desk and things. So the fact that Google are buying hosting services from Mythic Beast is kind of cool from their point of view.
Yeah, that's really neat. Have you been there? Do they just have giant racks of Raspberry Pis?
I haven't been there. It's a data center based in London. They've added, they started with Pi 3s, so Pi 3Bs. They added some 3B pluses when they came out. They added Pi 4s, the 4 gigs, and I think they have been planning recently to add the 8 gig models. I hope I haven't just broken confidentiality there, but I'm sure people would have expected it to come. Yeah, the last I heard, they were trying to get access to the data center to install more. But I haven't been myself. I'd love to see what it's like. But yeah, you can imagine.
Oh, really neat. So
but it's actually a really clever setup. Mythic Beast, they really know what they're doing, and they're good people to have. Whether you host on their Pis or their regular VMs, that they're the kind of people you want looking after your website. So the way the whole Pi network that they've built is set up is everything is, they don't use SD cards. It's all net booted. So they have a server that has all the kind of image references, and you boot from over Ethernet, and they all have PoE hats and things like that on them. So they've built a really sophisticated setup to make this happen.
Neat.
Yeah, I like the development opportunities there. Just the fact that you mentioned, like you said earlier, they like how Google's using it. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there for teams who don't want to actually invest in the physical hardware just to get their idea out in practice.
Yeah. No question. So what besides working on Pi, what is working on Pi your day job now?
No, I work in the BBC now. I work in a team called BBC News Labs, and we build prototypes of kind of new technologies that either help journalists do their kind of everyday jobs. Anything that we can find efficiencies and find, let's get a machine to do this instead of getting people to do it, and help them out because they've got to spend their time more wisely, that kind of thing. And kind of new audience experiences. We just kind of do short bursts of projects on new ideas for stuff like that within the BBC.
Have you managed to incorporate a Pi into any of that yet?
I don't think so. It comes up occasionally. A lot of people come to me and say, "Oh, we were thinking of, when they're managing the running orders for this TV program, we want them to like hit a button in the studio to tell us when something's good has happened, and then we can pick that up later, and down the line we'll be able to, tweet it at the end or something like that." And I think, it'd be really fun to, suggest we could have a Pi or a Pico or something these days, I guess. In that loop, it would be really interesting to add a kind of push button Pi element with GPL 0 or something to one of our work projects. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'm constantly looking for things in my day job as editor-in-chief of Tom's Hardware to find ways to make people more efficient with things that are robot work, right? Like there's things that we have to enter into our CMS or whatever where it takes like 20 clicks to enter it, and I'll write a macro or something to do it in one. And I have managed to sort of use Raspberry Pi, not for that kind of stuff, but someone says you should push Pi more. Indeed, I have used it for doing some web research, like having it go out as a bot and scrape some things for us. So even get data from across our own site to that we don't otherwise have, to try and help us, like, oh yeah, here's a better look at like what's linking to what on our site. But that's kind of web server stuff, not like physical computing stuff. I would love to find a way to make, bring Raspberry Pi into to our next trade show coverage. Just wear a Pico or something.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd like to wear the news. Next time I go to a trade show, I just want to get like a little OLED or something. Go across.
I'm sure Les can help you out with that. He's been he did some newspaper stuff this earlier in the week, I think, or the weekend.
I have, yeah. The e-ink display from Pimoroni. I've got that displaying the headlines of newspapers on my desk. It just refreshes all the time. I'll just
cool.
That's neat. Nice work.
There you go.
Oh, how cool.
Oh,
it looks like a tiny little newspaper.
Yeah, that looks good. That's a really good use for the e-ink.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
Oh, it's got multiple colors, doesn't it?
7 colors it'll do. I've got a Python script on that scrapes a website which has the images, downloads it, manipulates them so it's the right resolution, and then rotates it. So normally the rotation is that.
Right.
But I want it like that. Anyway, enough of that.
Wow, that's neat. See, I want that, but to be wearable, but to wear it and just have our headline, just have our homepage. I'll just walk around like that. So we got a couple of questions from the audience. This one I'm not sure if it's for Ben or just all of us. Any experience or observations about Home Assistant on Pi? It's a home automation executive apparently. Just learning of it. Wanted to graduate beyond Philips Hue.
I mean, I know a lot of people download this because I see the stats, but I haven't set it up myself. I've been meaning to check it out at some point. It does seem to be the kind of go-to place for an all-in-one solution for tying together all your off-the-shelf IoT things.
Yeah.
I think we need to give that. Thank you, Charlie, who sent in the question. I think we need to look into that on Tom's Hardware and see if we can write about it. Obviously, if you're talking about installing like an off-the-shelf assistant like Google Assistant, then there's some simple tutorials about how to do that. I know we have one for Alexa on our site. It's very easy to do that. But if you want to use something custom, the custom Pi stuff, we definitely have to look into that more, which I think would be very cool. So
you can get really in depth with home automation really fast when you think of stuff like we've covered a couple of garage door openers. There's so many little things in the house that you don't think of that you could control, like even just to heat and air systems, little things that could respond on a number of triggers, and then throw in a Pico, of course, and that's like a really easy tiny module you can use to trigger domino effect of things that happen.
Yep.
I don't know. It's neat. It's fun. Like Abram says, we need to get into it more.
Ben, do you have any Raspberry Pis controlling anything in your house?
Let me see. I did have Pi-hole at one point. I dismantled that at one point when I had some issues with it, but that was really cool. I've got a few media centers around the house that run that. Obviously, I've got a home server that's running like a proper kind of HP server that's running Ubuntu, and that's got all my kind of network files on it and things. So the Pis around the house can kind of talk to that. So I've got it's like handy to have one plugged in. I've got a couple on the desk and one by the big TV and that kind of thing. I use Steam Link on it occasionally. That's quite good for certain games if it can play fast enough. That's really good.
So, how we asked this question to most of our guests. How many Raspberry Pis do you have?
Honestly, if I came up with a number, I'd keep finding more because I open a drawer and there's an old Model B in there. Open another drawer and that's an old Pi 2. And yeah, I couldn't tell you. On the desk, I can see 3, I think. Yeah.
Yes, quite a few. If you count Picos and RP2040 boards, I now have crept over 30. I'm coming for you, Les. Les, who has 40. Although
Yes.
now you have Picos, so you're getting up, you're growing as well.
I've got at least 4 Picos on my desk and 1, 2, 3 pies I can see in different states. In fact, no, 4 pies because there's one behind that little newspaper screen.
Yep, we just always need one.
They're just within reach.
Always within reach. So Ash, you have one. You have the ultimate. See, you have the ultimate pie hat.
I do. I have the best pie hat ever. We're gonna have to update our pie hats list on our website. We have a list of the best Raspberry Pi hats. So this one is absolutely wearable. This is my Raspberry Beret, or should I call it a Raspberry Pi Beret? We've got an LED inside and a 3D printed Raspberry Pi logo. And of course, inside, it's not sewed up, so I can actually open it and show you the guts. It's got our favorite little Pico running it. I chose to use a Pico. Well, the demo is really basic. It's just running through a couple of colors, but I chose to use a Pico because you could trigger all kinds of things with this. As far as like the light effects goes, when it comes to controlling LEDs, you can go a little bit farther with Python. So if you just use, let's say, an RGB LED in your wearable, whatever you're making, and you're relying on its built-in rotation of colors, then you can't get as creative. And I wish I had a more creative demo to show off, but yeah, there's our Raspberry Pi Beret. And I did want to touch on wearables because we went over them earlier, but also I had this to show. This doesn't have a Raspberry Pi in it. I think a Raspberry Pi would make it better. But one time for a cosplay for a group, I made some scepters, and at the very bottom, I 3D printed with some clear resin these little diamond shapes. And inside, if we can see, there's a battery, and this lets it recharge via USB. And I can hit this button here, turn that bad boy on, and it rotates through just a few colors. And that's what I was talking about a second ago. You've got some LEDs that are pre-programmed to just rotate through, but with a Pico, you can maybe make it rotate through just 2 specific colors, or maybe it rotates through them really fast, or maybe whenever it detects Wi-Fi nearby with a few extra pieces, it could light up to respond to certain things. So, LEDs, they're fun. Put them in stuff.
Wow, that's great. Everything Prince is new again.
Right.
My
artist formerly known as Prince.
Yes, my son was watching this cartoon on Nickelodeon where they say the pirates are going to encounter purple rain on their show, unironically, next week.
That's silly.
So, speaking of things that aren't silly, Les, you've got a new tool that you've been testing that allows you to use the Pico with Raspberry Pi hats.
I have indeed, yes. Real hats, yeah. No berets, top hats, or anything like that. Proper hats for Raspberry Pis. So yeah, I got sent this a few weeks ago. It's from Red Robotics, and it's the Pico to Pi adapter board. I'm just give you a headshot now. It's this sort of red board here, and this is about $6. So $6 not including the Pico, and it comes as a kit to solder yourself. And luckily, I've got 2 of these kits. One of which has header pins on, so I can put a Pico of my own on. And another one has the Pico SMD soldered using the castellations on the edges, soldered down in place. And I have to say, it's a rather good piece of kit. It breaks out all the GPIO pins into a standard Pi header. And the pin mapping, which I've got to my left here for reference, because it has a few quirks, but it's very useful. Has a few quirks in where the pin numbers are. So you have to remember that you're using Pico pins, but using it in a Raspberry Pi GPIO header orientation. So, lovely piece of kit. I thought, what can I do with this? So I brought out the usual, which is the unicorn hat. So this is Pimoroni's unicorn hat, 64 NeoPixel LEDs. And I did my old favorite. So we just put this header on. So the header just fits on there. Snap, and you see it just covers all the GPIO pins.
That looks good too.
It's nice feel to it. If you've got one of the fat hats or the mini hats, give them a proper name. You've got the screw, the M2.5 screw mounting holes here, so you can hold it in place. But if you've got a larger hat, obviously you can only secure 2 of the holes. And I've got some code on here right now in CircuitPython, after speaking to Scott last week, who's our guest. And I've put on my usual disco routine that I do for LEDs. And here is my custom-made device to block out all of the light apart from the ones that I want.
Nice.
You can see it doing. There we go. So I enjoyed messing around with this board so much, I pulled out an old favourite. So this is Pibrella. So Pibrella is a really old board. And to give you an idea of how old it is, it only uses 26 GPIO pins. It's very old. It's one of the early Raspberry Pi boards. It's actually the board I learned to do robotics with. And as Ben can attest to, back in the day, sound like we're old men now in the pub having a pint.
If only.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? We used to do the Pi Academy sessions, the Raspberry Pi Foundation, with this board and teach teachers how to make robots and weird and wonderful things with it. So I've got some code to run. It's going to beep and make horrible screeching sounds. If you're wearing headphones, I apologize. There you go. I should be able to log in. Nope, cursor the live demo. It's saying it won't log in. That's fun. Yeah. Okay. But I have got a CircuitPython library that I've written this afternoon, which actually controls all the functions of this board. So we've got lights, inputs, outputs, that sort of thing. And it's all made possible thanks to this little board. So $6, £4.60, I think it is in UK money. We've got this really neat little board that I can do lots of great things with Raspberry Pi hats. And I have been messing around with other hats as well. This one is the 4-letter VAT. This is quite an old one again. This uses I2C. Now, for some reason with CircuitPython, I couldn't get it to work fully, but I managed to get some garbled text to appear on here. I was debugging it with this to make sure I could get it to work. So that's a work in progress. But for just standard GPIO work, just turning pins on and off, PWM for buzzers, that sort of thing, fantastic. And if you've got a board that's I2C compatible and you know how to work with it, that's the important bit, you can use it with this. So you can reuse all those hats that you bought for your Raspberry Pi on your Pico. And I'm quite impressed with it.
That is a useful little module. I could see that coming in handy in a new, and I just want to play with all kinds of different hats.
So Unpi asks, is there a wide e-ink display like the Pi top panel you showed?
This thing? No, this is just a piece of acrylic, Perspex. Plexiglass, I think it's called. You can get ultra-wide screens. I think they're 1080p tall. Is it 1080p? No. They're certain, so basically it's like this, but an HDMI screen. I think they're about $100. You can pick them up on Amazon. They do work. They've got a crazy resolution. So I looked at one for my Picade to use as the marquee at the top of the screen. So you can have animated marquees because there is a version of Emulation Station or Retro Pi, I'm not too sure which one it was now, which can have dual screens. So one can be your game screen and one can be just animated logos flying around. For e-ink, there's loads of different e-ink displays. Adafruit have got a range, Pimoroni have got a range, Waveshare have got a range as well. It all depends how much you want to spend, how much support you want, and what you want to do with it. So, I mean, this one here, the Inky Impression, this is 5.7 inch in diagonal in size. So it's quite a big screen, 7 colours. This is approximately £66. So in American money, about $80, $90, something like that. So it is quite an expensive screen, but you are paying for the fact that it has 7 colours.
Wow. So one thing I wanted to show really quick is speaking about CircuitPython, and we talked about, and I believe we've shown this on the show before, but I found a really neat CircuitPython library that will allow you to easily take this Pimoroni keypad, RGB keypad for Pico, and this would presumably work with other keyboards like the Keybow, and make simple keyboard macros for them in CircuitPython. So, so let me just show you really quick. So first of all, what I did with this is I assigned a button on this to crop for me in Photoshop. That's something that there's not a hotkey for in Photoshop, or in Photoshop Elements anyway, that I use, and that's kind of frustrating. So if I share my screen real quick, you will see over here. I'm going to take a you'll see over here. Whoa, that's not the screen that I wanted to share. Hold on. If I share my upper screen here, go. So you will see that, okay, here's something in Photoshop Elements, right? And if I highlight something and then I'm going to hit a button on here, hit, in this case, button 0, you see that it cropped it. What was it actually doing? It was actually hitting Alt-I down 3 times and then Enter for crop. Now, that's a standard macro kind of thing, and there are a lot of programs that will do that, but what's kind of neat is being able to do it using CircuitPython. So I won't take any credit for this. I found a library from someone named Wildest Pixel, which is, it's actually not a library, sample script for controlling this and controlling the keyboard and doing macros in CircuitPython for the RGB Pimoroni RGB keypad. And what I did is, there's obviously a lot of code, and if we're looking at this, there's obviously a lot of code here in terms of just starting up your keypad and getting it to recognize it and getting it to sort of light up a color when you press the keys. But the key part of the script, if you download Wildest Pixel's script, is the part around line 50 where it looks at each of the 16 keys, and you can have it to send keyboard codes. So here you can see I had it first send the Alt key plus I, then hit down three times and hit Enter. So that is something you can have it do. If you find an action like that and you just want to accomplish it in one key press, that would be a way of doing it. So there's a lot of potential here to take a task and automate it. So
I could see that being useful for streamers, like if you want to make a stream deck from scratch.
In fact, we have an article up on Tom's Hardware about somebody making a stream deck, right? So there are definitely a lot of opportunities to automate things, to make your life better, even in just small ways. I'm a big believer in, even if it just saves you a few seconds here and there, those seconds add up. Well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank our special guest, Ben Nuttall. And as always, we will see you next week at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. GMT. Have a great week, everyone.